There's war going on in this world. A war on freedom.
He's acting outside of his authority by saying you can't put something that you want in your own body. That's your own personal choice, and can't nobody take that from you, you know?
You're one of these taxpayers, and these are all your documents, and this is how we're going to rob you. It's fucked up, man.
It's more war, it's more spending, it's more debt, and it's less freedom.
We don't do that here.
Some people think that you can't be radical and pragmatic.
This is what we need, is a pragmatic radicalism, not moderation. Hardcore radicalism, but smart shit.
It's not sitting in a fucking basement with a bunch of fucking nerds.
You don't know shit, and that's the thing. You have to talk to people who think differently than you.
Like, his focus is not how horrible the government is, it's how wonderful liberty and freedom are.
That's what drives us.
People are coming together more and more and more and more as the government has been failing us.
We're just getting started.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Fight for Liberty Live. Super excited about tonight's guest. We've had multiple Clubhouse conversations and got myself really fired up for this episode. But first, I gotta do some background work, some housekeeping. First and foremost, if you are watching this stream on Twitter or YouTube or anything that's not Odysee, there's a link in the description. Go click it and watch this stream on Odysee. Odysee's better than everybody else. They are actually free market and freedom of information focused. They're built on a blockchain. They're not going to censor me. They're not going to kick me off or delete all my stuff. So go help me build up my following over there, because YouTube is dying and they're probably going to kill my account here pretty soon. So go do that. Also, follow us on Twitter and Facebook and subscribe to the channel. All the other places. I guess still subscribe on YouTube, even if, I guess, might as well. As for our sponsors, you guys know them. We love them. Nugg of Knowledge, wonderful cannabis products that you can get in all 50 states. If you are trying to get as high as I do during these podcasts, go on over to nuggofknowledge.com, use promo code F4L, and you're going to get 10% off. And we've got the Delta-8 vapes, what I usually am smoking on the show. There's CBD honey that you can put in like your tea at night. It's really great. That's how I'm trying to get my dad to start using cannabis. So I'm excited that maybe that'll work. So go on over, check them out. Definitely use the promo code. That helps out the channel, helps out the network, and it helps out other great, awesome libertarians that you know and love, like Tom Queter and Dan Berman, a whole bunch of other people. And our newest sponsor, Kemp for Governor, Kemp for Maine. You've probably seen him on here before. Harrison Kemp, he's an awesome friend of mine. He's running for governor of Maine. And this campaign, it started off as just a ballot access campaign. We were hoping for 5-10%. And since the launch, it's been extremely popular. He's gotten a bunch of endorsements, built up his team fairly large, and it's looking really awesome. So click the link in the description below to go to his site, learn more about the campaign, and donate. We're going to try to flip Maine gold this year, and it's a legitimate possibility, in my opinion, more than any other gubernatorial campaign I've ever seen. So go check that out. But without further ado, we have someone who's running for United States Senate in the wonderful state of Indiana. We talk about them a lot on the show and how awesome the liberty movement is out there. So without further ado, Mr. Jame Sceniak, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on.
It's going good. Thanks for coming. So I usually like to start off the show with kind of a testimonial question. So I'm curious, who was the first person to call you a libertarian, and was it a compliment or an insult?
The first person to call me a libertarian, I'm trying to think. So I was very, very vocal about it on Facebook during the Hillary Clinton and Trump campaign. And I think people just started to realize that I still consider myself an independent voter, but they're like, he's promoting all libertarians. And so it just kind of naturally went from there to say, hey, this guy's the crazy libertarian. And then I got this text saying, hey, what do you think as a libertarian about this issue? And I was like, that's the first time I got called a libertarian. It was one of my friends And I was like, okay, well, I guess I would run with this. I guess I'm a libertarian now. So it was through a text message. It was kind of crazy.
Nice. And was the 2016 race the first race you were really paying attention on, or is that just the one that you were the loudest about?
So it was the first one that I really fully paid attention to. There was other races like Rupert's in Indiana that I had followed, but more from the outside, just seeing how the libertarian candidates work in Indiana, understanding politics. I really enjoyed politics in general. So as far as like fully following, that would be the 2016 first race that I really followed.
Gotcha. Definitely can relate. I had just finished the show House of Cards when the 2016 race was like really kicking off, and I was like so into politics because that's what I do when I obsess over a TV show, is like just hyper focus on whatever industry they work in that TV show. And I was like, I'm gonna get into politics. And then I got in and I saw the choices and I was like, this isn't as fun as it looks on TV.
I mean, it makes for great television. It really does.
What's crazy though is the more that I get into politics and the more work that I've been able to do, and various campaigns. I've worked for 4 different parties at this point, and about 3 dozen campaigns. House of Cards is actually a lot more accurate than I thought it was while I was watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely did their research. I think there's a lot of backhanded things that happen, and we only see a certain what social media and what other media wants us to see. But yeah, politics is really intriguing on the inside, and watching it, even when I've known people in DC and seen what their opinion on how things are interacting, it's definitely interesting, and probably more like House of Cards than we care to admit.
Yeah. So what's your plan for if you win, you get to DC? How do you plan to try to guard yourself from the toxicity that is U.S. politics right now?
Yeah, so I mean, corruption is what we fight against as libertarians, and when we win, right, we got that issue of, well, how are we going to keep it out of our own politics? And a lot of that is accountability, being accountable to our own party, being accountable to those who helped us get there. But in addition to that, it's playing politics smart. And as a libertarian, we're coming in and we're going to actually be required to work with the Democrats and work with the Republicans, and they're going to want to get our vote because we're right in the middle. And that actually puts us at a standpoint where we can hold them to more accountability, and we can push for those issues that we want while not taking big government, or by not taking sponsored money and the corruption that comes with that. So it actually, we as a libertarian have a major advantage in that area because we have a lot of angles to play.
Yeah, and it's funny you say you mentioned when we win. I feel like we're starting to have to battle corruption in our party, even as losing, because we're starting to gain that steam and become a formidable force that actually can do some change. I see that. I see the fact that that's even a conversation within the party now as kind of like a white pill or a benefit of like, hey, we've got to be doing something right. We've got to be actually like gaining steam and moving in the right direction if we're starting to attract some of those more negative players in politics, because they wouldn't be here if we weren't a force to be reckoned with.
I definitely like to focus more on the positive, but with power, right, comes corruption. And if people are trying to use our party for corruption, that means that they think we're getting steam and we're getting power. So there wouldn't be any corruption if we weren't having momentum. And so in that way, it's a positive thing that we are fighting corruption and that we're doing it within our own party and that we can call it out when we see it.
Yeah. And speaking of momentum, I think, you're able to work off of probably the most amount of momentum that we have in the LP right now, being in Indiana, coming in after Rainwater's like record-breaking campaign. How do you plan to kind of capitalize on what he did in his campaign? What are you planning on doing a little bit differently to maybe shift focus to your issues rather than his campaign?
It's a great question. For those who don't know, Rainwater ran for governor, and he got close to 12% of the vote, and it actually had a lot of momentum for our party and for the ground level work. But I realized coming in that we needed a pro-growth plan. So what happened is his policies really took off, and they hit something that was wrong. I mean, Hoosiers realized that we need change. They realized that the Republicans weren't doing what they wanted. We're a highly red state. And they looked at the Libertarians and said, hey, let's do this. So we did end up close to 12% of the vote. And I looked at what Rainwater did to bring that momentum in. But I also realized that we have a long way to go. And part of that is my pro-growth strategy. So it's going to each county and looking for that base that we can take a actual base into an election and not have to appeal to nothing. So, we can point to each county and say, hey, we're doing the work in this county, and we're going to use the pro-growth strategy to build the momentum for the larger races, including the Senate race. Now, the second part of your question was, how do my policies differ from him? How do I take it and use my message? Within the Libertarian Party, the basic message is less government, more freedom. And so that's easy. He did that well, and I'm going to do that well but there are differences in how we run. And so I'm going to take the issues that are current for Hoosiers and look at what we're currently facing. So when I talk about my top three, it's the medical freedom aspect, which Rainwater did run a lot on, but he specifically used masks. I'm going to use more vaccines and other issues with the medical freedom. And then my second issue is vet care, which he was a veteran, so he was able to appeal to some of those votes. But I have a specific plan and a specific solution on the federal level. And then the third issue that I'm going to be taking is the fiscal responsibility. And that's just basic policy that really our senators currently aren't fiscal responsible. And the issue is like right now they call it spending budgets, but it's actually spending sprees. And they're not even concerned how it's affecting the next generations. So within that, I'm looking at those three issues, and I'm looking at it from a federal level versus a state level. So that's the main difference between our messages is where is the change going to take place and how does the federal affect Hoosiers, and how can I pinpoint that and show Hoosiers we need to change in Washington, D.C., where he did it with the governor's office, and he showed that we need to change within our own state. So there's differences, and there are very good similarities as well.
Yeah, it's good that that you guys did have a lot of similarities in your more high priority issues. It's crazy to look back at the 2020 campaign and because you mentioned that he was focused mostly on masks, and back then we were being called crazy for saying that what we're talking about now might happen. We couldn't really campaign on vaccines because it was a political third rail by then. Vaccine passports aren't going to be a thing. They're never going to mandate this. Like, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist for even saying that kind of stuff. And we had to just talk mostly about masks and some bits of medical freedom, but we couldn't say anything that would brand us an anti-vaxxer or anything like that, especially now if we wanted to win votes. And now it's like a huge campaigning strategy for a lot of the LP candidates and even Republican candidates to be like loudly almost anti-vax. It's crazy how much we've come in the last year.
No, you're exactly right. A lot of this was conspiracy theory at the beginning, and I would be careful using the word anti-vax because the reality is my policies aren't anti-vax. It's pro-choice. So it's if you want the vaccine, get it. If you don't get it. But the federal government should not regulate that. So even how we use our vocabulary is important. And with the anti-vax, I think it sends the wrong message, at least for my campaign, where I want people to have that choice. If vaccinations are right for you and you did the research and you talk to your physician, go ahead and get the vaccine. But if you are hesitant and you think there's some issues side effects, so I talk a lot about pill bottles, for example. When we look at a specific pill bottle, we see on it that there's a lot of side effects. Now we go to our physician and they often prescribe it and they'll tell you why they prescribe it, but we weigh the consequence of that decision. And so the reality is we have to decide if those side effects are, because they do affect some people, are worth the risk. And that's the same thing with the vaccines. We got to decide if that risk is worth taking, but that's a personal and individual decision. Physicians and politicians are different, and our politicians are pretending to be physicians, and they're just not. They can't make those decisions for all of America, and we need Washington, D.C. to stay out of those medical decisions.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And it's important to talk like you just did about how what we're asking for here is nothing out of the ordinary, as in the realms of any other type of medicine or vaccine or treatment or anything like that. You know, I've have a few friends that have refused chemo, for instance. You know, like that's a thing that people do where they just they weigh the costs and benefits and say, this thing that's proven to work, I don't want to do it because I'd rather go this other route, or I'm going to try this other thing, or whatever else. You know, there's been plenty of prescriptions that I've been prescribed that I either didn't finish or didn't even take because, you know, I had that conversation with the doctor or with other people and, you know, weighed those benefits and said, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I haven't gotten a flu shot in probably a decade because it's time consuming to like try to find a doctor somewhere and go and actually do it because I travel too much, but also just because I don't usually get sick. When I do, it's like 2 days, it's fine. So I just don't do that. So for me to be passive even about this vaccine is quite normal, and wouldn't be considered anything crazy except for how much they're focusing on this one and trying to make us sound crazy with it. So yeah, I like that you're kind of bringing that back to, you know, this is just normal medical practice of cost benefit analysis.
And you're exactly right. It is cost benefits. And not every body is the same. So that cost, it can be higher for some people. You know, I haven't looked at all the research, but there's some concern with the heart issues. If you're already have a compromised heart, is it the right vaccination for you? And only really your physician can help you guide with that. And we want to make things very black and white. And we want to say, hey, well, if everyone got vaccinated, it would just be easier to function as a society. But the reality is medical decisions are individual decisions. Our politicians need to stay out of it. And where do they stop? If they can mandate a vaccination for you, what's the next step? What medical decisions can they make for you?
Yeah, it's setting a very scary precedent that, you know, and it's another thing that 2 years ago we were conspiracy theorists on, and now there's a bunch of mainstream articles on is like what are they going to use the same rhetoric on next? And it's most likely climate change. And I'm a huge environmentalist activist. Like I've cared about that longer than I've cared about most of the libertarian-y things that I work on now. And when I ran for office, I got a bunch of support from like environmentalist organizations. I think you can be an environmentalist and a libertarian at the same time. So I don't like the people that try to paint it like I hate the like climate change denier style libertarians that are just like all of this is made up, because it's not. But if they're gonna use this same rhetoric to try to be like, oh well, you know, if we lock down 3 days a week, it'll help the environment. That's a provable fact. Like they were able to prove through a lot of different studies how much the COVID lockdowns help the environment. That's like even more solid science than what they're using to try to push the vaccine mandates and stuff like that. And yeah, 2 years ago we were conspiracy theorists for saying that they might try to use this on climate change, and now we've got, you know, CNN writing at least one article a month about all those stats that I'm talking about. Like, look at how great the lockdowns were.
Yeah, I mean, while we were locked down, I think, you know, I saw pictures of, you know, the fog from the cars before, and then afterward there's nothing. And I understand what they were saying, but what precedent does it have? Are they going to lock us down for environmental concerns? And that's another issue that, again, is probably a conspiracy theory at this point, but it is a relevant conversation. It's interesting that you've been really into environmental issues because I also was. And I remember as a 6 or 7 year old, I can't remember the exact age, but I was going into a grocery store, and for some odd reason, someone had placed their pop can in the fruit section, right there with the fresh fruit. And I was like, Mom, why would someone do this? And she explained to me, you know, about how we need to recycle. And I literally took that as a 6-year-old, and I was like, okay, well, we're going to recycle. And I went around and I made business cards, and they said, James the Can Man. And my grandpa had a printing business, so he was all on board. He got me the cards. I went around the neighborhood, and that was my thing. I recycled pop cans, and I actually made, as a 6 or 7-year-old, quite a bit of money off just recycling. So it's awesome that you have those environmental concerns as well. But when it comes to locking us down, that, you know, where is the precedent? What can they do? how much can they control of our individual lives, and for what benefit? So those are great questions, and they're definitely going to come up in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awesome that you were able to kind of earn a little entrepreneurial kick along with your environmentalist. It's a great thing to be able to learn at that young of an age. It's kind of that fend for yourself, do something good and get something out of it, kind of exchange.
I definitely credit my mom with a lot of my libertarian ideas, although she will not credit herself. It's funny because she claims she's an independent voter and, never to put a title on anything. But everything she's taught me is all about libertarianism. And, part of that was, if there's a problem, fix it and have those solutions. And entrepreneurship is a great way to do it. And so I credit a lot of my libertarian ideas to my mom, even though she probably is like, wait. I don't like the title, but
that's very similar with me and my dad. He pushed me towards a lot of these anarchy routes, and then I blew past him on that libertarian to anarchist pipeline. And now I'm dragging him down with me, and it's great. We have a comment from the Odysee stream that says, "Recycle DC, vote libertarian." And I love it, but I also have to disagree. I think we just need to throw most of it in the trash.
I mean, yeah, at this point, it might be just pure waste.
It's come a long way. It's actually interesting because we're talking about the environmentalist stuff here. That was one of the first, like, more major. I guess I don't try not to use the pill terminology all that often. I don't know how familiar you are with Malice and like the red, blue, black, white pill kind of stuff, but getting into environmentalism, and you hear a lot of the rhetoric of if you recycle or if you just stop using these products, reusable bags at the grocery store, all of this stuff, we can save the environment. And then you do a little bit more research and you realize that the US military is the biggest polluter in the world, and then China and Russia do so much that even if everyone in the US was perfect, it would probably still not do a whole lot. And there's just a lot of this why the problem is so much bigger than just ourselves kind of stuff, is really what brought me down that train towards actual libertarianism and being more active in it. Because I guess the way that I was raised is very, fend for yourself, fix yourself, live in liberty within yourself. But I don't give a fuck what my neighbor does. And at this point, it's like an argument that my dad and I have a lot often, is because I'm like, why don't you care about these things? And he's like, I just don't. And in some ways, I feel like that makes him more of a libertarian than I am, because I care too much about my neighbors. But yeah, the environmentalist stuff really helped push me down that train, because I was like, no, we need to end the wars and stop that catastrophe. That's going to do more than any amount of stuff that I can do myself.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of good points you made, but one thing you were talking about is, maybe I'm not as libertarian as so and so because I care so much, but really it's all about where we find our solutions, right? And so we can care a lot about our communities, we can care a lot about those individuals, we can care a lot about our planet and taking care of it, but where do we find our solutions to those? And if we keep relying on the government, it's not working. We've seen the results, and that's where the issue is. So our solutions need to come from our own communities. We need to reduce our waste from, like you said, our military is probably one of the largest waste. And along with that, there's, again, the individual can only do so much. But if we lower what the government is doing, what the individual can do becomes even greater. And we can make a big difference in our communities. And so, how much you care isn't really libertarian or not libertarian. What is where you find your solutions, and the government definitely is not the solution to this issue.
Amen to that. So I'm curious. You mentioned your top 3 issues, but I'm wondering if this might actually be a different answer. If you had to choose just one issue to focus on, knowing that you would actually get a win on that issue and solve that one problem, what would be the one thing you'd tackle?
So one issue, if you're talking about a winning issue, definitely. So the winning issues in Indiana are a lot of economic issues. And how do we bring fiscal responsibility? How do we stop inflation rates? A lot of our voters are looking at the retirement currently. So if we're looking at a specific winning issue, I would go with my fiscal responsibility plan. I'm looking a lot at the Cato, I believe it's the Cato 6.2% plan, and how we can reduce Social Security and opt out, but yet still take care of those who are relying on it at the moment. And it's a great libertarian approach to that. But as far as, one issue I'm actually more passionate about, it's a lot of the social justice issues. And those issues, unfortunately, don't get a lot of votes in Indiana. But I do have adopted siblings, and I do understand that we have a long way to go on one of those social issues. So even though they're not in my top 3, they're definitely, 4, 5, and 6. But we also have to look at how to get votes and how to win elections. So yeah, it's definitely interesting how I have to prioritize what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's I was curious if it would be a slightly different answer, and because you do have a fairly one-sided constituency. Here in New York, we have the benefit of having a lot of cities, but also a lot of real rural issues. So our statewide candidates get to play almost a wider spectrum of issues than even a presidential candidate would, because they get to be just state specific. But with I've worked a couple of campaigns over the last 2 years where it was very one side or the other, and it's interesting for libertarians who very often care deeply about both, that socially liberal, fiscally conservative kind of dichotomy. I know so many people that would hate me for saying that phrase out loud. But yeah, it's interesting for us to have to kind of tailor our message, and it's something that not a whole lot of candidates do or focus on. And it's great to see that you've kind of prioritized, what the people care about, because at the end of the day, you're trying to be a representative, not a ruler or a dictator or anything like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you're exactly right. So it's what my constituents will care about, and that's the issues I have to bring to them and support. But I can still work on a lot of those other issues, and it will affect them positively, and they'll see that. But the 3 main issues, I gotta get them riled up. I got to get them to go out and get the vote for me. So you gotta talk to them, and you gotta talk to your audience. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of the 2 sides. There are some blue areas within Indiana, but even those are starting to become more red. So yeah, talking about those points, but then I think the reason why the social points get me fired up on an individual level is because I come from the Republican side, and I worked on the Republican campaigns, but anytime social issues came up, they didn't have good solutions. They didn't care. Like, I honestly felt like a lot of them lost their heart. And so that was one thing that really brought me to the Libertarian Party. They have a heart, and that's important. And I think that when they see that presented in a very logical way with the issues that they still care about, they'll begin to get more on board with the social issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely relate there. I was raised independent, but very conservative, right wing. My parents always voted for the Republican candidate, but on the Independence Party line. So they were that kind of people.
Yeah, so that goes back to my mom, right? She always says she's an independent voter, and yeah, if you look at all of her tickets, they probably all are Republicans. So is she really an independent voter? I don't know, but
right. But yeah, for me also, the fact that libertarians actually, they cared about the things that I cared about without throwing all logic and like economic literacy out the window with it. Also, guns was a really big issue for me growing up, and obviously both Bernie and Hillary were terrible on gun rights, and so I couldn't vote for a gun grabber. So that kind of, even when I became really fired up about like the criminal justice reform and ending the war on drugs, I couldn't touch the Democrat.
Hey, Chris. He's froze. I'm not sure if it's on our end or his.
All right, there we go. We're back. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. I don't know if that was on my issue, on my
Nope.
side or not.
That was on me. My whole computer just disconnected from the Wi-Fi. It was just like, nope, we don't like that Wi-Fi anymore. We're just gonna pretend it never existed. It wouldn't be a true Fight for Liberty stream if there wasn't technical difficulties. That's what I've learned. What were we talking about? That completely derailed my train of thought.
We're talking
we're
about
talking
the gun rights and the Bernie Sanders and
right. Well, we were talking about libertarians actually caring about like the social issues. And I had a conversation, fairly heated one on Twitter this afternoon about the Georgia races going on, and Shane Hazel specifically, whether or not he should be running. I was arguing with libertarians who were arguing that Shane Hazel shouldn't run for governor because Stacey Abrams might actually win, and then make Georgia a horrible blue state instead of a wonderful liberty-loving red state like it is. And the people that I were talking to seemed to think that it was entirely impossible for a libertarian to pull from the left. And the idea that Shane could pull just as many votes from Stacey Abrams as from Kemp and not split the vote and not actually affect the overall result at all. Like it seemed to be completely out of their mind. And it's interesting because we do have so many common issues with them, and we do have a streak of actually caring more about what we're talking about than the Democrats. Stacey's a completely tainted like establishment candidate that most true progressives and leftists don't actually support. But it just seemed to be completely out of their mind. But it's nice to see candidates, and who I think Shane is one of, and you're another of, that have that ability to pull from the left because they do care about those social issues. And even though it doesn't make up a whole lot of your constituency, you'll still have that ability to go into, say, Indianapolis to a cannabis rally and be the most principled candidate there on their issue as well.
Exactly. So when we look at these issues, whether we're drawn from the left or the right, we care. You mentioned cannabis, and if we can talk logically about it, we can find solutions. And a lot of that goes, when we're talking to the right about that issue, we can talk about the fiscal responsibility aspect. Is it really worth spending the money to lock individuals up for cannabis? No. We can talk about the medical freedom aspect. People should have that freedom to medicate in whatever way they choose, and that may be marijuana and for some people. And so we can talk very logically about these issues, and we can draw the votes. But a lot of times when we talk about splitting votes and we might let a Republican win, or we might let a Democrat win if we run as a libertarian. Well, the issue with that is you're now saying that parties deserve a vote by simply deserving a vote, and they're not entitled to anybody's vote. That's not something that they're entitled to. If I am going to vote for a libertarian, I'm going to vote because they're the best candidate. And I think, the Republicans here in Indiana, I've talked to so many, and they afterward are like, I just realized I'm a disenfranchised Republican. They're not representing me, and they don't deserve my vote anymore. And so when we're talking about those issues, I think that it's important to remember that nobody owns your vote, and no party deserves your vote other than the one that you want to best represent you. Now, with some of those issues like we're talking about, so I'm trying to give a very solid explanation here. So, for example, when we're talking about the abortion issue, which is a very strong issue in Indiana, the Republicans left abortion centers open while closing churches. Now, if you're a pro-life voter in Indiana, let's think about this logically. A fully controlled Republican state left abortion centers open, and then they closed down your church. If they're really after your vote for the pro-life issue, why are they doing this? And pro-life in a Republican state, like that matters a lot to them. And they're very passionate about that. But it's also getting them to see that their own party's not representing their values. So no one deserves your vote other than the best candidate.
100% agree. And I know you can't see the Odysee comments, but it seems like you can, because while you were talking, it says, funny how both sides accuse us of, quote, stealing their votes. Votes aren't two-party entitlements. They don't own them.
And that's exactly right. 100%. I mean, when I'm talking to my team, that's the message that they all get from it as well. Nobody's entitled to our votes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really is crazy getting to work in the various different parties, and then for some independent and third party candidates. It's weird how pervasive that mindset really is amongst people. Like they really have fully put on the team jersey, especially in the last decade or so, where the idea of doing their team wrong is what's really keeping them from voting their conscience. And I liken it to the kind of mentality that we have a lot in the workforce as well, of that feeling bad for calling in sick kind of thing, because we've been so like ingrained into this like our bosses own our bodies kind of mentality. It's the same kind of just craziness that I'm seeing from the two-party system of like, oh, I couldn't vote my conscience because that might be bad for these overlords that I somehow respect more than I respect myself. And it's really pervasive.
You're exactly right. And I don't know how to, I'm working on messaging that and explaining it to the everyday voter. But when I was looking at the choices that was given me in 2016, it's like, I don't know how with my conscience I could vote for either of these. Neither represent my values. And I want to bring that message to Hoosiers is Republicans aren't representing you. Democrats aren't representing the values that they once represented. And especially on the Republican side, they are claiming fiscal responsibility as one of their main issues. Well, you look at our two senators, they pass every budget that comes across their desk. At this point, it's not even a budget, it's a spending spree that Washington D.C. is on. Mm-hmm. So where's the fiscal responsibility that you keep running on? And let's call them out. And how do we get voters to understand this, that they're not represented by their party anymore?
Yeah, I at least you have, like we talked earlier, a solid amount of momentum. You guys as a state have started to break down that libertarians can't win, libertarians can't affect change kind of mentality that most of the states have. That momentum I think should help your campaign significantly. But I'm excited to see what a lot of the groundwork that you guys have been doing. You were talking earlier about with your campaign strategy, that pro-growth strategy mixed with, we just had Evan McMahon on the show probably a month ago now, talking about like the Super Saturday program that you guys are doing out there, and some of the stuff that the party itself is doing. You guys are going to have a really solid, fired up base for local elections in 2023, regardless of the actual numbers that you poll.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So the pro-growth plan that I'm presenting as a campaign for the Libertarians, and then along with what Evan's doing on the state level, we in a non-election year have grown crazy amount. I don't know the exact number of affiliates, but we affiliated many counties. We're working on building that base. And as far as winning elections, I've talked to many people who are outside the party, and they're like, you have a legit shot. We are on the ballot, so why not? Why not believe that we have the legit shot and that we are going to better represent Hoosiers than everybody else? But it is a lot of work, and it is part of that pro-growth aspect. So if I'm not working on building our base, and if I'm not getting our counties ready to bring in the vote, to go out and get that vote, then we're going to lose because we are losing that momentum. Mm-hmm. So it's going around and, who's your county chair? And then what local candidates can I come behind and support? And if I'm coming behind your local candidate as a Senate candidate, I'm going to bring media with me. In addition, so your local candidate is going to get acknowledged. And then on top of it, we're building our base in that county. And so, we're working very closely with county chairs. We're working with all the districts. And I'm really excited to see how this will affect the vote in November. But it was started all the way back in July, in a non-election year. But I realized that there was work to be done and that we needed to do it.
Yeah, hell yeah. And you have a really awesome pool of activists. I piss off a lot of my friends in Pennsylvania because I call Indiana my favorite state affiliate.
I mean, it's my favorite, but I'm
well,
biased.
yeah. Well, I mean, New York definitely isn't going to be my favorite state affiliate. We suck. So it's a close race between you guys in Pennsylvania, but yeah, with people like yourself, with Evan, you guys have Cassie and Elizabeth, and just an awesome group of people out there that are getting fired up. And every time that I talk to someone from your state, it's just positivity, it's excitement, whether they're supporting you or Will or neither or both. It's a lot of excitement about what's going on in Indiana.
If you want to see people who do the work, you can look at Liz and Cassie. And I fortunately have Cassie on my team, and I can't even explain how much she does behind the scenes for me. She's my event coordinator, but that's a lot more than just events, right? She's giving me all the contacts where I need to be, when, and who is there. So there's so much work that she's doing behind the scenes that I can't even explain. And that's also part of my pro growth plan, was to build a solid team that can present well a campaign. So the face of the campaign is only goes so far. You have to have a team behind you. And Cassie does all the work, and Liz also does the work. So those two names that you dropped, you named two of the people in our state who really, if you want an example of hard work being done and diligent work being done, those two are incredible.
Hell yeah. I got the benefit of getting to meet both of them, ironically, in Pennsylvania last year.
Oh, that's the other thing. They literally travel the whole country, and it wouldn't shock me if most people listening to your show have seen them at one event or another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like most of my viewers are probably have run into Elizabeth, if not in person, on Clubhouse by now. Yeah, and I'm excited to see what that team is going to be able to do, because I couldn't agree more with the sentiment that the face of the campaign only goes so far. I'm a firm believer in the fact that the candidate works for the campaign manager, and not vice versa.
I was just explaining that to someone who wasn't even on my campaign or Libertarian. I was actually at work, and I was like, so when I was looking for a campaign manager, imagine trying to hire someone that you're trying to hire to be your boss. And so the campaign manager, I mean, I'm lucky I have Danny Lundy, and he does the work. I wouldn't be where I am at without him. But that was exactly what I was looking for, is somebody who I'm basically working for. And he knows exactly what he's doing. So you're right in that a campaign manager is one of your most important positions, and essentially is, the boss, the owner of the campaign.
Mm-hmm. And I like to tell that to people, especially because if you're, because I'm a firm believer in the fact that the LP has way too many candidates and not enough campaign staff, and so I harp on this point often to people who want to, who I see are wanting to run because they want that control aspect, like that's what they're good at, and that's what they think that running a campaign is going to be. And I'm like, listen, you have so much more control over the situation as a campaign manager. Be a campaign manager.
You actually do. And it was funny because in the early part, I did have a campaign manager who's still on my team, just switched roles. But part of my pro growth strategy was to build this team. And I took people without experience on purpose so I could give them experience. And with my campaign manager, that Eric, he's a great guy, and he does the work, but he wasn't sure how to run a campaign. Mm-hmm. And so when I was trying to run a lot of things behind the scenes as well, and there's some issues internally that we were figuring out. And so when I got Danny Lundy, I brought on him and to train Eric up, but Eric moved to my field director. So now I've got two people there. But I told Danny, I'm like, just tell me what you need me to do. Like, if I need to go find this person for my team, if I need to do this or that. And he's like, no, that's all my job. Literally, you're now hands off. That's my job. And I was like, wait, you mean I don't have to do any of this? He's like, no. And so people don't understand, but you have to have the right people behind you or it's just not going to work.
And it makes running a campaign so much more fun. I was on Clubhouse earlier, just kind of hanging out before the show, and was having this conversation with Jess Mears. She said that she will not work for a candidate that's not trying to have fun on the campaign. She said she's never going to take on the amount of stress that she has from certain other campaigns, and she's only going to work with people who are running and having fun with it. And what we're talking about here is so much more fun. If you as a candidate get to actually focus on being a candidate, figuring out how you're going to talk to people, like how you're messaging, and actually really just spending the majority of your time doing the thing, either speaking at an event or going from business to business, talking to people or petitioning or whatever work it is that you're actually doing. If you're just doing the work the whole time, like that's the easy part. To me, at least, that's the fun part. It's not like the back end work and the paperwork and the team building and the making sure that this director knows what they're supposed to be doing here and making sure that the funds are getting transferred correctly over here. That's the obnoxious part. So if you actually build your campaign up correctly, you get to have a lot more fun as a candidate.
And you do, and she's actually exactly right. I would add in a passion aspect there. And I think if you are truly passionate about what you're doing, you're gonna have fun doing it. But she's right. As a candidate, you need to have fun. I don't know. I can't say Obama had a ton of fun campaigning or not, but I look at him on the outside and it looked like he was having fun. He came to Indiana, which is a huge basketball state, and he was playing basketball on the streets of Elkhart, and he looked like he was having fun. Now, I can't judge if he actually was, but he looked like it, and that's going to draw voters, and that's how we need to run our candidates is with passion and to be able to relate to people through a fun way that is going to make a serious change in Washington, D.C., but where's the fun aspect? And we definitely, I love that she stated all that. That's perfect.
Yeah, and I told this anecdote in that conversation too, but the actual like final straw that earned my vote from Gary Johnson, and I remember this moment vividly, was when I saw for the first time the video of him faking the heart attack on the cannabis panel.
Like someone was just talking about that with me.
Like that was the moment. Like that was when I was like, okay, this guy has the right understanding of how serious this really is, because I saw that joke as more serious than had he not done that. If he had actually like responded politely like a politician there and like just dismantled her with numbers or something like that, it wouldn't have had nearly the impact that it did. And the fact that he was willing to do something that might be taboo, might lose him some support, some votes, or might hurt him, to put the emphasis on the actual issue that he was talking about and gain the reach that he did with that, and focus on how stupid some of these beliefs are about cannabis. Like I was like, this guy has the right amount of seriousness mixed with comedy and is actually having fun with this. That's the person I'm going to vote for.
Well, I will say numbers will not win votes. You could throw out numbers all day, and they are important. I got corrected at one of my speeches on some of my numbers, and that's great. I need to know those numbers, but that's not going to win votes. What is going to be those moments that people look at and they remember, whether it's that fake heart attack. Debates, political debates are completely different than factual debates or educational debates. Political debates is about those one-line zingers. It's about being relatable to the voter, being intelligent and quick, but it's not the numbers. It's being able to have fun on stage and show the voters that you're relatable. So those are perfect skills to have.
Yeah, and I credit a lot of that to Donald Trump's victory, and I honestly thought that it was going to be one of the things that might propel him to a re-election. he was the best debater we've seen in a while.
He was good political debater. You know, I'm not a fan of his, but he knew how to bring a debate.
Mm-hmm. I actually, there's a YouTube channel that I watch fairly often called Charisma on Command, and they break down either fictional characters or like actors and actresses, and just, you know, things that they do to, you know, better be salespeople or influencers or whatever. And they did a breakdown of the debates both in 2016 and in 2020, and it was probably my favorite overview of politics going on during the campaign, especially this past one in 2020, because everyone that was talking about it was skewed in some way, shape, or form, right? Even listening to a libertarian commentator on it was just getting tired and boring and annoying, because it's like, these guys are morons. And it was really fun to see a really just objective, like, which one of these guys is more charismatic and a better debater. And it was weird to see someone point out like objective ways in which Joe Biden is charismatic, because a lot of people are just like, he's boring, he's horrible, but he still won almost 80 million votes. People love him for a reason, and it was fun to see that breakdown. But yeah, like the couple of like one-liners that Trump got in against Clinton were fucking amazing, and I think really what kicked him up a notch in politics.
I was gonna say, probably won the election for him during the Clinton debates. I'm not gonna remember the exact quote, but the one where he talks about sending her to jail. I mean, everybody was talking about that.
I believe
he knew how to bring the attention.
Yeah, I believe it was something about her saying, she said that she's glad someone with his temperament didn't run the country, and it's just because you'd be in jail. Just one line. Or like the only Rosie O'Donnell comeback of, you know, they tried to throw like basically what was the main critique against Trump in my mind. Like, he's a pig. Like, that's accurate. Like, he's a bad person, treats women terribly, like, is a misogynist. Like, that's the one ist that I think is actually dead accurate for Trump. They threw like their main attack against him, and he just batted it off with a one-liner and made the entire crowd laugh and just diffused their best attack. It was, yeah.
But yeah, that's another important aspect of, you know, my Senate race. And fortunately, in Indiana, we actually get to be on the debate stage. So that's going to be a fun debate to be, you know, up against Todd Young. I'm already preparing for that and working on where I can attack him appropriately, and understanding that debate techniques. So I'm truly excited for that in our race. And I'm glad that in Indiana, we have the opportunity to be on the debate stage.
That's awesome. That was actually going to be my next question, was how difficult was it going to be for you to get on the debates? But so is it just a situation where if you're on the ballot, you're on the stage, basically?
Pretty much. Indiana decided that if we have ballot access, so anybody who can get that ballot access can be on the debate stage. And the reason was they want voters to be informed, which I appreciate. And so how we get on the ballot is through our Secretary of State race, which is, as a libertarian, that's our largest race coming up this next year. Even though technically I'm top of ballot, the Secretary of State race for libertarians is more important, because that's how we get our ballot access. So we need 2% of the vote in the Secretary of State race, and then we can be on the ballot. So because we already did that 4 years ago, I get the advantage of that, and I get to be on the debate stage.
That's awesome. How many statewide races do you have running with you?
Statewide, as libertarians, I only know of 2 other federal campaigns that have kicked off, and then we have our Secretary of State race. There'll be others. Another, I don't want to call it complaint, but another thing I wish that we started doing was announcing a little bit earlier. But yeah, I know of 3 federal candidates, and then the Secretary of State race.
Nice. It's great that, you know, you've already mentioned a few times of like working with down ballot candidates. I think that's in my very subjective opinion, I think that's one of the most tangible ways for larger candidates to actually, end up with some tangible results out of a campaign is to, push up a smaller candidate. And it's incredible how much time, money, and energy you save by doing that.
It's a legit win-win, right? Because the local candidates know the local concerns. They know how to reach their own communities. All I have to do is come behind them and come to their event. And then because I'm coming as a federal candidate, I'm going to bring some of the media attention. And it's legit a win-win. And that's how we're going to win elections this November. And we are going to win elections. That's not an if, it's a we are.
Hell yeah. I love that. Yeah. And it like I mentioned, it's a great time and energy saver as well. And it's something that the other two parties, they do all the time. It's not weird. It's not new. It's not awesome. They wouldn't spend nearly this amount of time talking about it on a podcast either, just because it's just what they do. It's how they function as a party, is to send out like group mailers, to send out door knockers that talk about all 7 candidates on their ballot. It's just how they operate.
And you're exactly right. And I worked on Republican elections, and I looked at how they won. And a lot of this that we're talking about is normal things to them. But yeah, we haven't done it yet the right way. And not that we haven't meant to, but we're reaching a growing point where we need to start emulating some of the things that the other parties do and applying it to our politics. And that's where we're going to win. And that's why I love coming behind people like Rachel Combs, for example. She's down in Owen County, and she's already talking about events that we're going to do together. But the idea is that this is nothing new. The Republicans are doing it. The Democrats are doing it. We can do it as libertarians, and we're going to win elections this way.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll got one more comment from your campaign manager. People, please go volunteer for a local campaign in your area and learn more about what it takes. They need your help, I promise. And we need more people in this party who are skilled and have experience to help our candidates succeed.
And he's exactly
100%.
right. And when and I would challenge the wording even a tiny bit differently. So he said, we need your skills, but we also need people who are just willing to do the work. We can teach you the skills, and that's something we're getting a lot better at as libertarians, and we're doing it really well in Indiana. So we did our with my pro-growth campaign, obviously that was an aspect, but then Danny put on a level up, and that was our convention last year. And that's the idea is we need to level up. We need these people behind your local candidates, and they can level up. We'll give them the tools to do it. And that's how we're going to win our local elections. And he actually focuses a lot more on the local level so I'm running federally, but he's got candidates down in Morgan County that he's really focused his attention on. And he's also a campaign manager for one of them. So he understands what it takes to win those elections. And it's the same thing, whether it's on the federal level or on the county level. You have to have a team behind you, and he knows that message.
Hell yeah, man! I should get him to come on the show, talk about what it takes to run a campaign.
Yeah, if you want someone knowledgeable, Danny Lundy is one of the most knowledgeable people. And I was watching one of your shows, and you're talking about data analysts. That's exactly what he does. And
probably Dan Fishman.
Okay. Anyways, it reminded me of Danny because it's funny. He's a data analyst, and he knows numbers. And I sent him one of my speeches. And what does he do? He breaks it down in numbers. He's like, you talked about this point for 1 minute. You talked about this point for 38 seconds. You talked about this point. And I'm just like, okay, what does this do me? He's like, well, you need to actually even out these points. You need to, and he's a numbers guy. So it's great to have him on my team. And it's great that he's doing that behind the scenes. And people don't see that work that he's putting in. I mean, they do, but they don't realize it's his work. And I love it. I love having that data come at me, and I love how he's running my campaign. I can't ask for a better manager.
That's awesome. And it's funny how you said, they can see the work, but they can't see the work, because that's how you know that they're doing it right. Like, their job is to make it seem like you are a superhuman that can do like 7 people's jobs, but actually it's like 30 people. And the job is to be as unnoticeable as humanly possible as a campaign team.
Yeah. So funny story about that. I went down to, I believe it was Clay County. But someone said, wow, your speech got that much better, James. Like, you're growing as a candidate. And I'm like, well, I got to give credit where credit's due. You know, Danny's doing all this work behind the scenes, helping me improve. He's like, stop talking about Danny. You're improving. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't get it. Like, it takes a team behind you. These improvements don't just happen themselves. I mean, yes, I can notice improvements. But when you have somebody saying, hey, you need to iron your shirt. Hey, do this. It takes a team effort. It really does.
Yeah. And because you can't, one human doesn't have the brain capacity to do all of those things and actually be a good candidate.
No.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I mean, you're exactly right. So I call it the chessboard. Chess is one of my favorite games. But as a candidate, I'm the king piece, right? I'm the face, essentially the game. You want to call it that. You don't have a king, you don't have a game. But a king does nothing as far as movement. Your political director, your campaign manager is going to be the queen, doing all the work and getting everybody up. So as a candidate, there's only so much brain power I have. And although I like to think that I'm intelligent, my brain doesn't see things that other brains do. So it's important to have that team behind you. It's important to have your queen. It's important to have the pawns. It's important to have all that in place going into this November election.
Yeah, just don't call anybody here pawns to their face.
No, and the thing pawns have a negative connotation, but I always play my pawns so that they become queens.
That's a good analogy. I like that. But yeah, you're 100% right there. And like, I got really spoiled early on in politics. I got my first like very major job was working with Tulsi Gabbard, and she had the mindset of a candidate down better than almost anyone else that I've ever seen. And even though we were still a small, fairly unfunded, fairly grassroots campaign that looked fairly libertarian from the outside, like the way that her and her campaign, internal campaign staff worked was seamless. And she didn't have to worry about most of the things. She wasn't writing her speeches. She wasn't planning her events. She wasn't setting up her events. She wasn't cleaning up her events. She was doing 2 or 3 media appearances and a town hall every day for about 3 months straight, and just going and doing the thing. And we were running around behind her, making sure that when she got to places, there were people there and events. And one of my main jobs early on was actually I would go from business to business and ask the owners if it was okay if she came in and talked to people, and then ask the people at the like coffee shop or whatever, like, hey, Tulsi Gabbard's coming by, would you be interested in talking? And like find the people there that actually gave a shit about her, so that when she showed up, she only had to spend 10-15 minutes at each establishment and talk to the people that wanted to talk to her, not bother people that didn't care, not get spat on or told to fuck off, and just use her time wisely. And those kinds of like just little time savers, most campaigns don't have the people or the know-how or like the mindset of doing that. And I got really spoiled early on, and I've been kind of like chasing that high since.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you point that out, right? And a lot of people don't understand that's how a campaign should work. I'm lucky as a libertarian. I have somebody driving me to all my events. I mean, we're talking 3 hours away. And what that does is it allows me to mentally prep on the way there, make any phone calls I need, do social media, which hopefully I won't even do any social media soon, but we're working on that aspect. I do have people working on my social media, just trying to figure out how to get my voice through. Mm-hmm. So, he's saving me 3 hours there. And then on the way back, I tell him, I'm so mentally exhausted right now, I don't even know how I would drive home. And so it saves me in that area. And Eric, he's my field director. I'm lucky to have him behind me and doing that. And that's how it should be, right? I go to an event. They've already done the prep work. They're already getting people there. And I do the speaking. I get people riled up. I get the voters. And ultimately, if we run our campaigns, we're going to win doing it by this method that you're talking about.
Hell yeah. And I can speak to, I mentioned how much more fun it is to run a campaign when you have the team like that. It's also more fun to be on the team. Like that job with Tulsi, as menial as it may sound, as far as just like, going and talking to people to prep them for her, that was so much fun. Like that was one of the most enjoyable things I've ever gotten to do in politics. Because I got to spend a decent amount of time with her and her team and her husband, who's one of my favorite humans on the planet. And got to get to know her a lot better. But also, I got to talk to a couple hundred voters a day, and from a place of like somewhat authority. It was a much different dynamic than when I'm knocking on doors, because I have the candidate coming behind me and I get to get them excited about the candidate, and
Right.
they're excited that they're about to talk to a presidential candidate, or in your case, a U.S. Senate candidate, which is still fucking awesome. Like for most people, like that's cool to just be sitting there drinking your coffee in the afternoon and have a U.S. Senate candidate come in and shake your hand, know your name already, because I found out your name and told you what their name was, so you get to go up and be like, "Hey Johnny, it's nice to meet you," and have a 5-minute conversation with somebody. And that's really fun from a personal standpoint. So if you're watching this and you're someone that is just kind of getting into politics, looking at how you might be able to help out, and maybe you're a little bit shy, need that oomph to break you out of some shyness, that's a fucking fantastic way to do it. And it'll get you prepped up for being able to do that as a candidate in maybe 2 or 3 years. Don't jump right into running. You can help out a campaign and do stuff like that, and it's super fun.
David, you hit on so many good points. And one thing I want to point out is you are essential and important to her team. And she knew it, and she knew your value. And additionally, like you said, run campaigns behind the scenes. Well, you have the experience of talking to voters now, right? And that's an important experience that you can get running somebody's campaign. Not everybody knows how to go and talk and start the conversation and then introduce get the names for the candidate so they know ahead who they're talking to. This is essential roles that we've got to do as libertarians. If we want to win races, that's how we do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, like how many members she even had on our team, and some of that behind the scenes. That's really incredible. You got to do that.
Depending on where we were, that number was pretty small. Actually, her campaign was really interesting because it was a weird mix between like a very tight-knit in-person, like official-ish campaign mixed with a national, like grassroots, super volunteer, super dysfunctional campaign. So there was about maybe 20 people in New Hampshire that all lived in one of 2 Airbnbs that we rented out for like a year. And we all just kind of like lived together, worked together. We were all volunteers, but they were putting us up and feeding us. So, we just were kind of skating by. And so like that campaign team was like really tight knit, and like we were basically a family by the end of it. And then there was about another 3,000 to 5,000 volunteers scattered across the rest of the country that I was eventually the deputy volunteer coordinator for the national team. So it was my job to work with all of those people instead of just this super tight professional team that we had built up in New Hampshire. And that was a shock.
That's awesome. That's such an incredible experience you got.
Yeah, I owe a lot to that campaign. I ran for office just before that, and I quit my day job to do so. And I loved running for office, but had that campaign not been all that it was, I probably would have gone back to just normal work afterwards. And instead, I haven't punched a clock since. I've been working in politics full time for almost 3 years now, and I love it. And I'm glad that I chose to stay in it.
That's awesome. Truly.
So tell people how, if they are in Indiana, how they can find out more about your campaign or get involved or help out or donate.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to help out my campaign. If you're a libertarian, I'm looking for those district chairs for my campaign. I'm looking for the county chairs. And basically all that is after March, when I get the nomination, you're now going to be that contact in that county. You're going to be that contact in that district. I can send Cassie and say, hey, this is the name you need. Let's get events going. And what local candidates are there and what I can do to come behind. So if you're looking at a volunteer, that would be one of the best ways to do that, so I can have a base all across Indiana. Now, if you're just curious about my campaign, www.sceniakforsenate.com. That's a great way to look at what I'm about. I have several speeches on there already, so you can see my platform. You can see how I communicate to my base. And then lastly, and I can't stress how important this is. I know politicians always ask for money, but we're in a very critical role right now. And, just going to convention, my team has a $2,000 goal. So donating is extremely important. You can do that at www.sceniakforsenate.com/donate. And I do appreciate the big donors that have come in, and I appreciate you guys. Because of you, we're going to be going into convention, and we're going to go into convention very professionally. And so I'm excited for that, and I'm excited for the donations I have gotten. But we can do so much more, and we can spread this message. We can spread the message of liberty to all Hoosiers. So thank you for that.
Hell yeah. I love that you said in March when I get the nomination. I'm a nice little nudge.
I mean, it's a competition, and ultimately sparring back and forth is making us both better. But I have to go with the confidence that I'm going to go, and the Senate race is my full focus. So I'm excited for it.
Hell yeah. And I'm loving seeing how you guys are running against each other. I think that a lot of people in the movement and in other parties could take a page out of your guys' playbook here. Just the way that, you're not being too nice, I'll say. Like I've seen a couple of races and like primaries, especially in the LP, where there are just no teeth, that it just doesn't exist, and they're barely running until the nomination. They're kind of just like, they're holding off running a race until the nomination instead of just not attacking each other. But I think you guys are both running. I'll say I see a little bit more activity on your side lately, and you guys both are running for this race, but you guys aren't tearing each other down or being nasty or divisive or obnoxious. It's a good mix.
It is. And honestly, I love my sparring example, and I probably overuse it. But the idea is that you want a sparring partner who's going to throw punches. You want a sparring partner that's going to get you ready for the big fight. And no matter who wins that nomination, we're both on the same team. We're both that sparring against each other. But ultimately, we're both libertarians. We're both good candidates. And this is only making us both better. So, no matter who wins the nomination, we're still going to be doing the work. Both of us are going to be doing that work. I'm still going to go out and do my pro-growth campaign. And if he wants me to, I'll come on as his field director, because I think that would be a good role if he won. Now, if I win, I would love for him to write my marijuana policy. It's something he's really good at, really passionate about. So there's aspects that we can help each other after March. But, until March, game's on, right? So I'm expecting to win the nomination, and I'm excited for it.
Hell yeah. And what these kinds of primaries do is it enables, like you're talking, to build up a really good staffer for the victors campaign, whether that's, like you said, bringing your field policy over, or for him, not even just working on the policy, but even just his activist career and what name recognition he does have enables him to be kind of a surrogate for the campaign, and maybe go to a cannabis rally and speak there on your behalf or something like that, which is something that we really don't have a lot of in the movement.
You're right, and you nailed it. And he's one of the best activists I've seen. He's great at that, and I love his activism, and I appreciate him for that. And I'm excited to work together for this Senate race. But again, like you said, you can't be too nice before the primaries. I call primaries because convention isn't known to the general voters. But, the idea that we do have a well-run 2 Senate candidates that can help each other is only going to help our momentum and movement.
For sure. And I really hope that the 24 primary can do similar things, because it's something that we really drastically lack in presidential races, and something that we saw a little bit in 2020 was some of the candidates kind of sticking around after losing the primary and being somewhat helpful to maybe at least like down ballot candidates. I talk a lot about like Lincoln Chafee and Judge Jim Gray both spoke at the Wyoming State House on behalf of Marshall Burt's cannabis legislation. So like that was something cool to see, like former candidates come back and do that. But if you look at like the way that the Democrats ran 2020, both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren did more events for Biden after his nomination than Joe Biden did for himself. And then you had a slew of other people also doing similar things. They had events in multiple states every day. All of these people with gigantic crowds, big followings, and a lot of name recognition behind them, campaigning on behalf of a candidate who wasn't putting in a whole lot of work. If we could not only put in the work that our candidates do, because, you know, none of this to discredit Jorgensen and Spike, because they both work their asses off. If we could have them working their asses off and like Dan Berman, Vermin Supreme, Adam Kokesh, and all of these other people doing the kind of work that Bernie and Warren were doing for Biden, we would see 5-10%, not 3 or 4.
You're exactly right, though, and that's part of what I was talking about, emulating the other parties and what they're doing right. And they do fight in their primaries. I watched the Democratic debate, and there were some good lines, and they didn't, refrain. But what happened when one dropped out? They immediately went to who they backed, and they continue to campaign for them. And if we can emulate that as libertarians, instead of just going and do our own thing, we'll be winning and we'll get the numbers we want.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the things, as annoying as the infighting and the caucus warfare and everything that's going on in the LP has been, I think one of the benefits that we are seeing is an influx of people with the ability to do that surrogate kind of work. We have, the joke's been made, or the phrase of like the Liberty Movement is joining the Libertarian Party coming out of the Mises caucus. And as many problems as I have with them, I have to completely agree with that kind of rhetoric, because they're doing that. They brought in people like Tom Woods and Dave Smith and other like people with followings and name recognition, as well as like this kind of rise of other like Liberty podcasters with like Clint Russell or Reed Coverdale. We have a lot of people now in the movement that have the ability to do something like speak on behalf of another candidate at a rally or something like that. And that's got me fired up for what we can do in 22 and 24.
You're exactly right. And I'm so excited for this November, and I'm excited to show what we can do when we work together. And for the Liberty Movement, through the caucuses, I know we have our differences, and everybody wants to show Liberty as their own brand and how they brand it. But ultimately, if we can come behind our candidates, even if it's not our exact branding of Liberty, or even recognizing what the different caucuses do right. And in Indiana, we work together. A lot of the Mises caucus, I know them personally, and I acknowledge they grow our party. And in Indiana, we haven't had the conflict that the national level has, because we understand that we can work together. And it doesn't matter, if we see eye to eye on every single issue. What matters is we're advancing the movement, and we're showing what Liberty can do for Hoosiers.
Yeah. And we have so many roles in the party to fill, and such a need for people. And, we are such a small movement at the moment that we don't need to fight over too much. Like there is a place for literally everyone and every set of priorities and every set of skill sets and anything that you could possibly want to do to help move Liberty forward. There's a place for you without displacing anyone. No one needs to be displaced.
Exactly. Sometimes we get so focused on perfect ideology, and then politics takes a back seat, and we actually suffered in numbers because of that and suffered votes. But, when we can say, okay, we match on this ideology, and this ideology, why don't we advance together? And yeah, we can argue, over a coffee table, but we're still going to be friends at the end of the night, and we're still going to advance together the message.
Yeah. I think that, we've talked a lot about like the things that we can take from the other parties, and I think that this is one of the places that people are scared to take from the other parties. That kind of like vote blue no matter who mentality is like a logical endpoint to this kind of talk, I guess, to a lot of people. And I think that we do a really good job of walking that line of, when the problems are too much, when we no longer match up on these ideologies, we call people out. We ran Bill Weld, but we did a really good job at calling him out, especially afterwards. And, I didn't really know the issues with him when I voted for him, but, he's never coming back to the Liberty movement. He's never coming back to the LP. He's never going to be respected in the party, ever. We run people out when they're actually problematic. And, we can look at some of the other types of infiltration. Like, we ran Chris Cantwell out of the party. We ran plenty of other people who have gone down that like alt-right pipeline. We do have a way of cleaning up our own that doesn't have to be so constant, I guess. But
well, I always say good ideas win out, right? And these people, certain ideologies are just terrible ideologies. And, we like to include, because of freedom of speech, et cetera, that some of these people are libertarians or whatnot. But the idea is that ultimately, when we present good ideas, they're going to outwin the bad ideas, and the bad ideas are going to no longer have a place in the libertarian movement. And that's just because of their own issues. But ultimately, good ideas win, and we need to keep presenting the good ideas, and we need to share why they're good ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like at the end of the day, if people with bad ideas think that our ideas are good enough to vote for us or maybe like support us, that's fine. We don't have to actually like give their bad ideas credence or support. And I think we can see this in a really like extreme level of like for other than Trump, pretty much every endorsement that David Duke has made since I've been watching politics, I've kind of agreed with, because his priorities are like freedom of speech and association for the wrong reasons, but it leads him to endorse people that I actually somewhat usually agree with. That doesn't mean that, but none of those people, except for maybe Trump, some could argue, none of them sought his endorsement or like gave credence to what he was saying or like tried to like bring him into the fold of their campaign in any way, shape, or form. They just were principled, and these people chose to support them. And so I think we can keep the bad people and the bad ideologies out of the party and out of the movement without freaking out when someone with those bad ideologies isn't pushed out hard enough, and still maybe throws an endorsement our way. I think we overreact to that kind of stuff too much as well.
You're right. You're definitely right. And I think it's something we are going to improve on. And as Danny says, level up. And that's what we're doing. And we're learning the process of how to level up and how to work through these issues. And that's part of the fun of the growth. And that's the positive side is we are growing and we are learning from this. And that excites me as a party.
Yeah, 100%. Well, before we wrap up, I'll give you one more shot to shout out, like just an elevator pitch of why people should support your campaign and how to find out more about it.
Yeah, definitely. So again, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And I am excited because we're taking a fresh, modern approach to Washington, D.C. Todd Young is stale. He's wasteful. He's invasive. And he is not representing Hoosiers. So we definitely need our ideas of freedom, and we need to represent Hoosiers better. I'm going to do that through fiscal responsibility. I'm going to do that through my vet care. And I'm going to do that ultimately through medical freedom. And I believe that we can make a difference in Washington, D.C. So please consider voting for me for the nomination in March. Please consider voting for me in November. And also consider a monetary donation. Those really do help. www.sceniacforsenate.com/donate. I appreciate you guys listening tonight, and thank you, David Fite, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Guys, thank you for watching. Definitely go look up his campaign if you're in Indiana or not. Find out how you can help out. And then go follow him on Twitter and Facebook and all the other things, and then go donate. Not in that order, because I guess you donate while you're on the website. Don't leave the website and go back and donate. That's silly. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you did end up watching this on one of the tech monopoly bullshit websites, go like it on Odysee and subscribe over there and use that link to share it. I'm really trying to push as much of my following over to Odysee as I possibly can, because I love them and what they're working on. And then check us back out tomorrow night. We'll be back at 9 p.m. with the wonderful Ovens O'Brien. So definitely come back and check that out. Until then, keep up the fight.
Shut up and sit down.